going to be speaking to you today about the first half of January and the full moon that we have in Cancer on the 13th. And I've got a lot to talk about. This is going to be a jam-packed year. We certainly begin the year with a bang, that's for sure. And as I'm going to be publishing this just around about the time of the 1st of January, may I take this opportunity to again thank you for all your love, all your support, all your wonderful comments and shares, etc. So I'm very grateful for all of that, and I really hope that you have a spectacular 2025. It's going to be probably the biggest year of our life so far. So lots happening. So let me start to talk about the beginning of the year. And we're into this energy already, but we have this very important opposition between Mars and Pluto. Now, this is happening exactly on the 3rd of January, and we'll feel it really for the first week in January. And this is at 1 degree of Leo for Mars, 1 degree of Pluto for Aquarius. Now, I've already filmed a video talking about this Mars-Pluto opposition. I'll put the link for that below, but I'm going to kind of add to it as we go through this video because it really is incredibly important. The first, it has 3 exact passes, as it were. The first was on the 3rd of November last year. Then the second one on the 3rd of January, and the third one is going to be on the 24th of April. So we're not going to be out of the influence, really, of this Mars-Pluto opposition until early May. So that's a long period. So if you can think back and see where 1 degree of Leo is falling in your chart, where 1 degree of Aquarius is falling in your chart, to see which house area it's falling in. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you can download a free birth chart from my website. Go to this link below. You can buy a 2-part video series that you can watch forever, to infinity, to understand what these points in your chart, where these points in your chart are, to get the meaning for you with all of my updates. It's not a personalized birth analysis. These are teaching videos. So if you can think back to what was happening for you at the beginning of November, then you may start to get some meaning of what this whole 3-hit process is about for you. And it's interesting because any opposition is really suggesting some kind of polarization that needs integration. Now, on the 3rd of November, I think polarization was extremely clear, for instance, in the US. That was 2 days before the American election, and the polarization was extreme. Feelings were running very high, and it was so, that opposition was so clear that you were at one end of the spectrum or the other end. That opposition at that time was happening in the late degrees of the cardinal signs, Cancer, Capricorn. This time around, it's in the fixed signs of Leo and Aquarius. And so that can mean that people are becoming even more entrenched in their differing views, even more fixed, even more dug in, if you like, in their differing views about whatever. So much to say about this. So if you personally have any planets or angles between 0 and 3 degrees of the fixed signs, which are Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, Aquarius, over the next 2 years, and I do mean 2 years because Pluto will be hovering between 0 and 3 over the next 2 years, you will experience some very big endings and beginnings in your life, in those areas of life where Pluto is aspecting. Now, for all of us, I think 2025 is going to be about endings and beginnings. That was the whole theme of the video that I did recently with Kathy Rose. I'll put the link for that below, looking at 2025. But in particular, you will feel these endings and beginnings if you have planets or angles between 0 and 3 degrees of the fixed signs. So, but the purpose of that is to really help your soul's growth. Even though sometimes we feel endings are quite painful, ultimately, it's all about your soul's growth. And Pluto is always a process of empowerment, personally, for sure. So, what is this aspect about? Well, apart from this feeling of polarization, it's about power plays, control, manipulation. You may see that playing out in your own life or on the public stage. It could be heightened aggression. This is brute force, heightened aggression, passion. And if you have this natally in your chart, any aspect between Mars and Pluto, it can give you terrific willpower and focus. So one of the very good things about this aspect is locking on to a project that you're working on to give you that willpower and focus to see it through to the end. It's extremely determined. And a full moon that we're going to be talking about in a moment is always a culmination. And in a sense, any opposition is a kind of culmination of what began at the original conjunction between Mars and Pluto. And in one sense, Mars is about your individual will, and Pluto can be about state or governmental will, power over you as an individual. And that's how it can play out on a lower level of expression. But ultimately, I think what this will teach us, more of us, is this sense of polarization of I'm right, you're wrong, whether that's in your personal life, whether you're seeing that in your local or national politics, whether you're seeing it in wars between nations. Ultimately, it's the I'm right, you're wrong polarization, people digging in. And I think one of the things this powerful opposition will teach us is, boy, have we done that to death. How long have we been around this hamster wheel of I'm right, you're wrong, of judgment, of the other side is the loser, I'm the winner, and winner takes all, war, disease, death, this whole sense of separateness. And I think, I just find it inconceivable in the 21st century. We have such horrific wars, genocides going on. It's absolutely inconceivable that we are still doing this to each other. And so what I think that opposition between Mars and Pluto will teach us at a higher level, because at a higher level, Pluto is about your divine will, aligning your personal will with your divine will, is to release the judgment, move away from the separation, and move towards unity consciousness and away from any possibility of fight, aggression, judgment against another, war, etc. That's my hope, that we will align ourselves more fully to divine will. I hope this makes sense, because there's a lot to this opposition. It's really quite complex. So, as I say, with fixed signs, because Leo and Aquarius are now in fixed signs, there is the potential, however, for digging into your I'm right, you're wrong position. So please be aware of that. And because this is potentially such an aggressive opposition, please stay in peace. Please take a breath, because it's quite reactionary, it's id anger, it's impulsive. So please, whether it's coming from you or whether it's coming at you from someone else, take a breath before you react. Just take a breath. That breath could really save you from being impulsive and impetuous and then later thinking, gosh, I really wish I'd handled that differently. So really think, be mindful and stay in peace as far as you're able, because the more of us that stay in peace, the more that's going to feed into the collective. A good way to use this energy as well as aligning with our divine will, is to step into our sovereignty. Leo, as I've said a great deal recently, along with Aries, one of the two signs that's very much about our sovereignty and our inner authority. Mars is going to stay in Leo that first week up until the 6th of January. And this is also, it can be well used in physical exercise or physical courage or being an initiator or a pioneer in something. Kathy Rose talked about this a lot in our video too, and that's a really positive use of it. However, it's so multi-layered. Just this one opposition is so multi-layered because Mars is still retrograde, and it will be retrograde until the 24th of February. So you might want to make a note of some of these dates because, as I say, there's a layering effect going on here. So as we begin 2025, Mars is retrograde until the 24th of February. And when it's retrograde, it means it's closer to the Earth. And retrograde planets, think of the RE of retrograde. Mercury retrograde is when we go back over our thinking or our writing. With Mars, it's about our physical action. So you may be going back over, contemplating how you've used your power in the past or lack of power, impotence, and given away your power to others. Do you have any aggression in your nature that you need to kind of handle differently as we go forwards? Really think about that. It's thinking about your power, your courage, your sovereignty, your aggression. How fully have you used that? How well have you used it? Or how rashly and precipitously have you used that? Or how much have you just given it away to others? A really productive period to think about that. But Mars, as I say, on the 6th of January, retrogrades out of Leo and into Cancer. And that has a very different quality of being less about sovereignty and shining in your power, shining in your individuality. It's a very different energy of wanting to protect yourself, your loved ones, your family, wanting to kind of hunker down. It's about your emotional security. It's about your physical security, very much wanting to protect your loved ones. So that has quite a different feeling about it. And Mars will stay in Cancer until the 18th of April, when it moves direct back into Leo. And so we're back into this standing tall, shining, standing in your sovereignty, your creativity, your accomplishments, happy to be center stage. It's very different. So, and this movement of Mars is between 17 of Cancer and 6 of Leo. So see, again, I covered this in the Mars and Pluto video, as I was talking about how it's working personally for you, but see which houses that movement of 17 of Cancer to 6 of Leo falls in. It could be one house, it could be more than one house. What areas of life is that going to be affecting for you? And so when Mars is retrograde also, because Mars has a very simple direct energy normally when it is moving direct. It's just go, go, go. I've set a goal and I'm going to go for it in the simplest, most efficient way I know. However, when it's retrograde, it's one of the trickier planets to handle because that go, go, go could feel quite frustrated that somehow there's a delay or an obstacle or a problem. What could be top-down power saying, no, you can't. So it can be kind of that physicality can be turned inwards. So as I say, the best ways to use it are just exercising physically or really working on a project with focus and willpower. That can be really good use. But it can mean, because Mars is also your energy, it can mean that you feel quite tired. You may feel frustrated. Yeah, there's a kind of spinning wheels to some extent. So spinning wheels, but that will be released on the 24th of February when Mars then moves direct. Also, another layer to this, another reason Mars is so powerful at this time is that Mars on the 30th of December moved what is called out of bounds, beyond the normal 23 degrees north or south of the ecliptic that within which planets normally orbit. And when they do that, they tend to express in a more extreme way. And again, I talked about that in the Mars-Pluto video. But just to recap a little, it's going to be out of bounds from the beginning of 2025 until the 7th of April. 7th of April. So that makes Mars want to express to extremes. Now, in one way, that could be because Mars is god of war, Mars is aggression, Mars can, this kind of impulse to the physical. It can mean that we get a little punchy, a little overreactive again, too quick. It's this id-ang of too quick to be assertive or aggressive. So again, take a breath, step back to any particularly combustible situation. So be very aware, because that can kind of, again, backfire, and you may afterwards think, gosh, I wish I'd just taken a moment to take a breath. The other way it can express very positively is almost physical breakthroughs. If you're a sports person, if you're very athletic, this can work superbly to go beyond your personal records, go beyond, out of bounds, go beyond is a very good expression for that, particularly with Mars, of personal breakthroughs, of excelling physically. So you can really use that if you're sporty, if you're fit, you can use that to excel in a really, really positive and productive way. So that, as I say, is running up until the 7th of April, and then Mars comes back within the 23 degrees. It can deepen our sense of sovereignty and physical and inner authority, because Mars is strong, our sense of our individual will and our inner authority. So really, this whole period, this long-term period for the next almost 20 years until January 2044 of Pluto in Aquarius, is the beginning of the shift of power to the people. And that includes you and me. The collective is made up of all of us as individuals. So really do start to feel that, because we've lived in victimhood for so many lifetimes. And this is our chance to break out of that, that hologram. So yes, once Mars moves direct, there can be a kind of go, particularly after it moves into Leo, which is a fire sign, on the 18th of April. So note down these dates because of this, quite complex overlapping of what's actually happening with this Mars cycle. Then we move to January the 11th, and two things are happening on January the 11th. Firstly, Eris moves stationary direct. Eris is the sister of Mars. She moves stationary direct at 24-23 of Aries. Again, Aries ruled by Mars. So she is the feisty one. She is the street fighter. She is the uncompromising warrior who wants every voice to be heard, nobody to be excluded. She stands for justice. She stands for truth. She stands for total social inclusion. I love Eris. She's rebellious and she will not compromise. And so she is very strong. This is going to be a year of truth, 2025, big year of truth and revelation. And Eris is a big part of that. So the 11th of the month is going to be strong. Also on the 11th of the month, we have the North Node at 0 of Aries. The very first degree of the zodiac, the Aries point, the world point, the world axis. And when anything is on the world axis, that's 0 of Aries, it also applies to 0 of Cancer, Libra, Capricorn, within 2 degrees either side, but it's particularly strong when it's 0 of Aries. It throws, if we're looking at a mundane chart, it throws those events onto the public stage in some way. If you have that natally in your birth chart, that throws whatever the planet is onto the world stage. And I've often said I've got my Mercury at 1 degree of Aries, so compulsively I have to write and speak publicly. So that's how it works. It throws that principle onto the world stage. Now, if we look back to when the North Node was last at that point, it was way back in June 06, 206. And it only stays at that degree for not even a month. But what we had in, remember, Aries is primal fire. So what did we have if we look back to June 206? We had extreme wildfire activity. We had 61,000 wildfires. You may remember this in California, Nevada, and Oregon. You may remember that. But within a very short space of time later in June, because the nodes always move retrograde backwards, it had moved on to 29 degrees of Pisces. And that is much more related to flooding, water, seas, oceans. So what happened that was on the public stage later in June 206? Extreme flooding in northern Ohio, Pennsylvania. It was the worst flooding Ohio had seen in 40 years. And I fully expect, as Neptune is hovering around those last couple of degrees of Pisces, and also it's currently conjunct the North Node, it's going to be exactly conjunct the North Node on the 7th of February. I fully expect that we are going to see some flooding. In fact, it's kind of crisscrossing that final degree of Pisces. It's certainly up until late March, and then it retrogrades back in later in the year, autumn time in the Northern Hemisphere, and stays there until January next year, 2026. But I fully expect we are going to see some quite dramatic flooding. So that's the kind of thing. So we go from kind of primal fire to flooding in 1 month. So that may well be what we start to see through January and February. We will wait and see. I do think we're going to have weather extremes, as I've said in the last couple of videos about this, in 2025. So, and it's often about a fated event when it's at the world axis, some kind of fated event that we might expect. So we will see what unfolds. I think the shift of the nodes, and they spend 18 months, 18.6 months in opposing pairs of signs, opposing pair of signs. So they're moving out of Aries Libra into Pisces Virgo. And one of the big themes, I think, is going to be recognizing the sacredness of Mother Gaia, reconnecting to the beauty, the depth, the wisdom, the sacredness of Mother Gaia. I think that's going to be really special. And there's so much more to say about that. I'll probably do a separate video on that another time. We have enough to talk about in this video. So let us now look, after all that, that was just the build up to the full moon in Cancer. Let us now look at the chart for the full moon in Cancer on the 13th of January. Okay, so this is happening London English time, 27 minutes past 10 in the evening. So if that isn't your time zone, ignore the clock face, ignore the houses. We're just looking at where the planets fall and their relationship to each other. So always at a full moon, you have the moon and the sun opposing each other. This is at 23 degrees, 59 minutes of Cancer. Now, one of the first things I noted, I've just been talking about flooding, we have 5 planets in water signs. We have the moon and Mars, we have Neptune, Saturn, Venus, all in water signs. That's a lot of water, particularly considering that Neptune is conjunct the North Node, And the North Node is imminently dipping back into Pisces. So it's wet. And that can signify also a lot of emotion, as well as flooding, a lot of compassion by people feeling compassionate about the rest of humanity. It can work in that way as well. What I find fascinating is that this full moon at 23:59 of Cancer, the sun at 23:59 of Capricorn, is really just over a degree from that very important Saturn-Pluto conjunction on the 12th of January 2020, which was at 22 degrees 45 minutes of Capricorn. And it was that started off the whole pandemic. And that historically, as I spoke about so many times, was historically that was about the abuse of power. And it's interesting how it played out, isn't it? So now we kind of have an echo at this full moon because it's so close to that point. We have an echo of that full moon, and okay, we're kind of 5 years on now, because remember, it's the 12th of January 2020. I mean, this is almost to the day. How far have we come since then? How far have we come? In terms of where we were then, in terms of your own consciousness, your own awareness, how the power structures in society are working, because I think they are just at the very beginning of changing quite radically. Again, I've spoken about that a great deal. So contemplate that, because I do think that's going to be one of the big themes, not only for this full moon, but through 2025. The power dynamics, the social, political, and economic structure in societies globally is going to start to change in 2025. We still have the intensity of this opposition. It's out of sign now because it was exact on the 3rd, between Mars and Pluto. And it's heightened. Yes, it's not exact anymore and it's out of sign, but nevertheless, it's heightened because it's falling across this full moon. So this potentially can also mean angry people. Moon in mundane astrology is to do with the people, and for sure intensity around issues of power, because Pluto now is in Aquarius, of course, until January 2044, around issues of freedom, human rights, civil rights, equality versus inequality, humanitarianism, etc. These are going to be writ large for the next 20 years. And this full moon is highlighting all of those. So it could be, big time for power issues in the world. I'm going to be referring back to that at the end of this video. The Cancer Capricorn axis is about our emotional security and our practical security in light of this intensity and passion and all that's going on with the Mars-Pluto opposition. So we'll see how this unfolds, but the more you can kind of live this internally and integrate it, as opposed to the external reference of the anger or the control or the noise or the wars, or the more you can integrate this within yourself as courage, sovereignty, be a pioneer, stand tall, operate from this sense of center, the easier the whole of this year will be. That goes all the way through this year and ongoing, actually. But we also have a T-square here, because the sun and moon are actually square to Chiron. Now, it's very interesting here also that Chiron is at 19 degrees of Aries. Chiron was at 19 degrees of Aries, exactly to the degree conjunct the total solar eclipse on the 8th of April in 2024. Remember that total solar eclipse that fell across America? It's exactly conjunct Chiron. And here we have it highlighted again at this full moon. Now, Chiron in Aries, as I've said many times, everybody's got Chiron somewhere, and the sign where it falls indicates your original wound. In Aries, it's very much to do with the I amness. So here we're back to sovereignty, we're back to issues around victimhood, and we are wounded in the I am. We are wounded in the I am. And Chiron entered Aries from memory, I think it was the late 1960s. So everyone born from then on would have Chiron in Aries. So we've tended to defer to external authorities. So interesting, square to Capricorn, governmental authorities. We've tended to defer to external authority. And so both at the total solar eclipse, 8th of April last year, 2024, but also again now, this is helping us to reflect, were we still wounded then? Have we healed at all? Now we're into January 2025. Have we healed some of that sense of victimhood? Or are we still feeling that woundedness? But whichever way it goes, it's highlighting that issue. And of course, what is interesting also is the sun and moon are also in a tighter square to Eris, with all that I've just said about Eris, because Eris doesn't tolerate victimhood. Last thing Eris would have on her agenda. She's going to fight to the end. She's going to win on her own terms. Victim isn't in her vocabulary. So this is a very different quality of energy as we move into 2025. Also, I want to remind you that Chiron, another meaning of Chiron is the maverick, because Chiron's orbit is in between Saturn and Uranus. So Saturn is the conventional, the traditional, Uranus is the rebel, the revolutionary, and Chiron orbits in between those. And when you have Chiron highlighted in your chart, or even by transit, it can be a time where you feel excluded from society, you don't fit, you're the odd one out, you're the maverick. But we can turn that around to become a mark of distinction of, yeah, I'm absolutely a unique individual, and I'm really feeling that sense of individuality. And what is wonderful about the Aquarian energy is it celebrates your uniqueness as an individual, but it also welcomes you to bring that unique gift in to the group, to the collective, to the whole, to form every available piece of the puzzle to create the whole jigsaw. The jigsaw is not complete without the smallest piece. So this is also about authenticity as well, which is very much what the Aquarian energy is about. We also have this ongoing square between Jupiter and Saturn. This was exact on Christmas Eve, 24th of December. It will become exact on the 15th of June, I believe. And so it doesn't complete till then. So just again, see which houses these are falling in your chart. I've done a whole video on this, which is looking at the personal side of this Saturn Jupiter square. So see which houses they fall in. Jupiter tends to expand the house area it's moving through. Saturn tends to give us focus or work to do, etc. But this is a reality check on our belief system, for sure, as the veil falls from our eyes and more truths come to light. For every single one of us, I think we will have, big reality checks in our belief system. In passing, I think it's fascinating that Gemini is some of the associations of Gemini are to do with birds and lungs. Birds and lungs. And Saturn in Pisces is to do with the blood and our immune system. And I think that's quite interesting. So Jupiter could overblow, exaggerate. I'm sure you're following me here. Any issues here? but Saturn is also the reality check. Let's be sensible, let's get real about this. This conjunction between Venus and Saturn is interesting. Venus is exalted in Pisces, very happy in Pisces. It's a beautiful place for Venus to be. If this is falling in your 5th or 7th house of relationships, this can either be testing a relationship, seeing it less romantically and more realistically, pragmatically, to see if it's worth it. And in a strong relationship, this can consolidate it. I actually got married under an aspect like this, but it tests a weak one and consolidates a strong one. The other way it can play out is there's some financial issue where there's a limitation on currency values or wealth. There's a pulling back in wealth and currency value, so we might see some changes there globally. But Venus in Pisces is really quite a beautiful place for it to be. And these planets are going to bunch up in, I think it's February. We're going to get a conjunction between Venus, Saturn, Neptune, which can be quite beautiful, but that's for a later video. We also have Uranus, the planet of the individual, authenticity, the maverick, the planet of awakening, the planet of truth, exactly by degree, trine to the sun and sextile the moon. And this is bringing in more ease with expressing our individuality and our authenticity. It's very interesting. I was chatting to a friend yesterday, and she reminded me that authenticity is very, very high up the list of Dr. David Hawkins' map of consciousness. It's very highly rated in an expression of consciousness. It's kind of walk your talk, be true to who you are. Don't falsify. Don't put on a false face, because that's going to be spotted this year for sure. We also have Mars exactly by degree trine to Neptune. This can be beautiful, actually, for spiritual action. Spiritual action can be Qigong, Tai Chi, yoga, working down at the soup run, that kind of spiritual action. It brings in a great deal of compassion. So that's a beautiful aspect in this full moon in Cancer too. We also have, just want to say as well, going back to here, I've often mentioned that because Uranus is in Taurus, and we're seeing a lot of revolution, of course, by the farmers around food production, etc., this can also, in its trine to the sun, bring in new ways, innovations in food growing. And I'm just seeing so many of those that I'm posting on social media every day virtually. Another beautiful trine is Jupiter to Chariklo, our wonderful, wonderful Chariklo. And Chariklo, you remember, was the wife of Chiron in myth. She's the sole midwife. She's there at transitions of life to death, but transitions of consciousness. She holds sacred space. She is the silent Buddhist ground of being. Beautiful. That is, Chariklo is always there for us. And Chariklo in this trine to Jupiter is saying potentially this is an expansion of consciousness, an expansion in Gemini of our neural networks. We are going to see potentially, the potential is therefore a huge expansion in consciousness in 2025. Many people are feeling this already. We also, as we just get to the midpoint of the month, we have Mars coming into, it's the sun moving on into an exact opposition to Mars. And again, that's a very strong power day. And that will be at 26 degrees of Capricorn Cancer, because Mars will have moved back a degree in its retrograde by then. Another power day. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen here, but what I'd like to do now is just look, because this full moon is very powerful in certain countries' charts and certain countries by astrocartography. And what astrocartography means is if each of the planets was to leave a shadow falling across the Earth from this kind of astronomical position, where would they be falling astronomically? Sorry, geographically. So we're going to take a look. And when I looked at the astrocartography, it was very interesting to see where it was falling in Washington, D.C. And the clock face has shifted, yes? So we've got the same planets, same degrees, but because we're looking at a different geography, and this is reflected clearly in the astrocartography, because I don't want to get too technical here, but if it is clear in the astrocartography that certain planets are angular, if you run a chart for that geography, you will find that, yes, indeed, they fall on the angles. If you didn't understand a word I said there, that's fine too, because we're going to look at the chart now. Because you can see that Chiron in the T-square is right on the midheaven. This is to do with the government, the leadership at this time. I don't know whether that's referring to the current leadership or the imminent leadership, the inauguration on the 20th of January. I don't know. We will see, because the full moon has influence, of course, after the 13th. But we have this very powerful full moon Mars conjunction right on the ascendant, and the Sun Pluto conjunction on the descendant. So essentially what this means is that the potential for this powerful full moon, one of the probable areas for it to manifest strongly is Washington, D.C. I'm going to be mentioning a whole load of geographies and countries in this next few minutes. And that doesn't mean that every single one of these countries will come to prominence, will be in the news, because astrology is a language of mathematical probability, but it is likely that some of them will in some way. So that's Washington, D.C. So this talks about, certainly some Mars activity happening that is either initiated by Washington, D.C., or some powerful things happening with regard to America. We will see. I don't want to surmise. I never see the events, so we will see. But that is quite interesting. I also want to say that it is angular. This full moon in Cancer is angular, i.e. the potential to come to public view through South America, through Venezuela and Brazil. It's also angular through Indonesia. It's also angular on the midheaven IC, so governments and the land, through Eastern Africa. That is Ethiopia, Tanzania, and I think, Kenya, Eastern Africa. So we'll see it's either the government or the land, something happening with the land. At this full moon in Cancer, we also have Uranus on the IC, the land, the base, and that is quite a sudden radical change. It's quite an eruptive energy, running straight up north-south through central Australia and up through Tokyo. So again, we will see. I never see the events, as I say. So just to mention several countries' charts, and what I will do is put the details of each of these charts below this video so astrologers can go and cast the charts themselves and take a look at them. Now, I've mentioned several times recently that the chart for China is highlighted because China has its moon at 3 degrees of Aquarius. Pluto is going to be in that exact opposition to Mars on the 26th of April, as I think I mentioned, at 3 degrees of Aquarius. So it's going to be exactly conjunct the moon for China, and the moon is the people. Pluto also has its ascendant at 5 degrees of Aquarius. Pluto doesn't get there till 2026. But certainly the people will be stirred up in some way in China, anywhere from sort of April onwards. Now, this can be quite a revolutionary energy because, again, we're looking at Aquarius and the power starting to shift to the people. China hasn't in the past handled that kind of thing that kindly. So we will see what unfolds. The urge for China towards empowerment will be very strong, particularly as it's getting closer to the ascendant. Again, we will see what unfolds. This full moon is conjunct the midheaven of New Zealand, midheaven, government, leadership. It's also opposing the sun of New Zealand, again, the leader. And the sun in the chart for New Zealand rules the 11th house of politics. A lot of these charts are talking about the politics of countries. Full moon is things coming to culmination, coming to a head. Very interesting. The full moon is also conjunct Israel's midheaven. Just to give you the exact midheaven for New Zealand, by the way, it's 23 degrees 58 minutes, which I think is it's within 1 minute of this full moon, which is at 23 degrees 59 minutes. I mean, incredible. This full moon is also conjunct Israel's midheaven, which is at 25 of Cancer, and it's square to the ascendant descendant of Israel. Transiting Uranus is also conjunct the sun in Israel's chart, and that again is the leader, and it rules the 11th house of politics in that country. The full moon is conjunct Iraq's sun, and that is its ruling planet, 21 degrees of Cancer. That's also not just only the leader, but the identity of the country. The full moon is conjunct the ascendant of France. France has many charts, so I believe that I've chosen the one that resonates most to transits, and that is at 24 of Cancer, the ascendant. Interesting, the South Node is conjunct Venus in that chart, which also rules the 11th house of politics in that country. And we know that the French government has recently lost a vote of confidence, same in Germany, by the way. So we will see what unfolds there. The full moon is also conjunct Ethiopia's moon, which is in the 11th house and rules the 11th house. So again, politics, the people, we'll see. The full moon is also, as well as what I've just said about Uranus being conjunct the IC by Astrocartography, the full moon is also conjunct the IC in Australia, which is at 24 of Cancer. So we have a lot of possible geographies coming to the fore. The second half of January is equally strong, but there's a lot happening in the first half of January. And it's interesting, I've been thinking a great deal about all that's going on in the world, and we've got a lot of tough stuff externally in 3D, and I think we often think that and I've talked about this many times, that the external events are just so overwhelming. We just don't know where to start with the huge number, the kind of polycrises of the numbers of war, disease, death, misery. It's just everywhere. The economy, poverty. Where do you begin? And I've talked so much in so many of my videos, almost every one, about the need to turn inwards, because that's what creates our reality. We create from the inside out, not the outside in. And the more you live from the outside in, you're going to be just buffeted. You're going to be rubber hitting the road, and it is going to be overwhelming, and particularly 2025, that's going to be moving at such speed. And So I know that in my bones, but I was reminded today before I filmed this of, I'm going back almost 20 years now, and I follow Joe Dispenza's teachings, and at the time I attended about 14 of his workshops. This is starting about 20 years ago. And I remember being in one of his workshops in Denver, Colorado. I remember it distinctly. And there was a lady there called Susan, even remember her name. And she stood up because she'd been really battling with stage 4 cancer. And she stood up to say that she was now completely clear of cancer. I mean, people just burst into tears all over the room, but she was now completely clear of cancer. And I remember Dr. Joe saying very distinctly, and it really struck with me, and I've never forgotten it, and is there a Susan on another dimension that still has stage 4 cancer? And that really stuck with me. And recently I've been thinking, it's not that when we can achieve the emotions that, I and many other people talk about all the time, of love and joy and gratitude and peace and compassion, that we change this world. Is that we, with our raised frequency, our raised consciousness, shift to a different dimension where those challenges don't exist. We shift to a different dimension where those challenges don't exist. And that's a very different concept. And the reason I'm talking about this here, and the reason I was reminded of what that Dr. Joe workshop was, I just happened, very occasionally I listen to Bashar, channeled by Daryl Anker, and Bashar said exactly that. It's not by raising our frequency that we change this world, this 3D Earth. It's that we shift into a higher dimension where these things don't exist. And that isn't a kind of cop out of I'm all right, Jack, because each of us has the choice to do that. And if a huge number of us can shift just through simple joy of being in nature, hugging your dog, hugging your child, hugging your tree, all the simple stuff I bang on about all the time. If we can shift into that higher dimension, we pull the collective with us. We pull the collective with us as a spiritual responsibility. So I'm thinking deeply about this at the moment, and it really is resonating very much with me. So I hope a lot of information there. I hope you've hung on till the end, and that makes some sense for you. But it's a big full moon, this one, to kick off the new year, and it's a big Mars-Pluto opposition as well. Take a breath. Stay in peace. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being with me. Much love, and I'll be back very soon indeed, in just a few days' time, actually. I'm interviewing Martha Alter Hines this week, and that's going to be something quite different. So I'll be back very soon. Much love to you all. Bye for now.